The unexpected alliance. The warning alarm screamed through Captain Jake Morrison's cockpit as his fighter ship spun out of control toward the crimson surface of Sirian 7. Plasma fire had torn through his engines during what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic escort mission. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a decorated pilot from Earth's Defense Force, about to become a smoking crater on an alien world while trying to negotiate peace. Jake gripped the controls with white knuckles, fighting against the gravitational pull that wanted to turn him into space debris. His ship, the Terran's Edge, had been humanity's finest engineering achievement just 3 years ago. Now it was nothing more than a falling coffin wrapped in titanium and broken dreams. Through the crackling comm system, he could hear the distant voices of his squadron calling his name, but they were already light years away, heading back to the safety of Earth space. The impact came like a giant's fist. Jake's body slammed against his restraints as the ship carved a burning trench through the alien landscape. Metal screamed against rock, and for a moment that felt like eternity, everything was fire and noise and pain. Then silence fell like a heavy blanket, broken only by the steady drip of coolant fluid and the whisper of escaping atmosphere. Jake forced his eyes open, tasting blood on his lips. His left arm hung at an odd angle, and every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. But he was alive, which was more than he had expected 30 seconds ago. The cockpit canopy had spider-webbed, but hadn't shattered completely. Through the cracks, he could see an alien sky painted in shades of amber and gold, with twin suns casting everything in an otherworldly glow. Getting out of the wreckage took longer than it should have. Jake's survival training kicked in, methodical and precise, despite the pain clouding his thoughts. Emergency beacon activated. Medical kit secured. Sidearm checked and loaded. Water recycler damaged but functional. He had maybe 3 days of supplies if he was careful, maybe less if this planet's atmosphere was as hostile as the intelligence report suggested. The landscape around him was both beautiful and terrifying. Crystalline formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning, catching and refracting the double sunlight into rainbow patterns that danced across the rocky terrain. In the distance, Jake could see what looked like a forest of silver trees, their branches moving despite the absence of any wind he could feel. Everything about this place whispered of ancient secrets and dangers that humanity had never encountered. Jake had taken maybe a dozen steps away from his crashed ship when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. It was soft, barely audible above the alien wind, but unmistakably a cry for help. The voice was different from any human voice he had ever heard, musical and somehow hollow, like an echo from the bottom of a deep well. But the pain in it was universal, the kind of desperate plea that transcended species barriers. Following the sound led him to a sight that would be burned into his memory forever. Partially hidden behind a formation of the strange crystal outcroppings was what remained of an escape pod, its hull bearing markings that Jake recognized as Zephyrian, the same alien empire that had been at war with humanity for the past 5 years. The pod had been torn open like a metal flower, its contents scattered across the crimson ground. And there, pinned beneath a twisted piece of the pod's hull, was the source of the voice. She was unlike anything Jake had ever seen, even in the classified briefings about enemy species. Her skin had the translucent quality of fine crystal, with veins of pale blue light pulsing beneath the surface like living circuitry. Her hair flowed like liquid mercury, catching the double sunlight and throwing it back in patterns that hurt to look at directly. She wore what might have been armor or ceremonial dress. It was hard to tell where the material ended and her crystalline flesh began. A circlet of some unknown metal rested on her forehead, set with stones that seemed to contain tiny, moving galaxies. But it was her eyes that stopped Jake's breath in his throat. They were the deep purple of space between stars, ancient and intelligent, and currently filled with a pain that made his chest tighten in sympathy. She looked at him without fear, which surprised him more than anything else. Here was a member of the species humanity had been fighting for half a decade, and she showed no terror at the sight of a human warrior standing over her broken form. "Please," she whispered, and somehow Jake understood the word despite never hearing her language before. "Help me." Every instinct screamed at him to be cautious. This could be a trap, a trick designed to capture or kill him. The Zephyrians were known for their cunning, their ability to manipulate situations to their advantage. But as Jake looked down at the broken figure before him, trapped and bleeding a substance that looked like liquid starlight, he saw something that transcended politics and warfare. He saw someone in desperate need of help, and his human nature, the part of him that had driven his species to become the galaxy's most stubborn survivors, wouldn't let him walk away. Jake knelt beside her and carefully began to assess the situation. The piece of hull that had her pinned was too heavy for him to lift alone, especially with his injured arm. But he noticed that most of her body seemed intact. It was just her left leg that was trapped. The real problem was the spreading pool of luminescent fluid beneath her, growing larger with each passing second. She was bleeding out, and from the way her breathing had become shallow and rapid, she didn't have much time left. "My name is Jake," he said slowly, hoping that universal translators or some kind of telepathic ability might help her understand. "I'm going to try to help you." The alien woman's eyes focused on his face with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. "Jake," she repeated, her pronunciation turning his simple name into something that sounded like music. "I am Layrana of the Crystalline Throne, third princess of the Zephyrian Empire." She paused, breathing heavily. "I am dying." The casual way she stated this fact hit Jake like a physical blow. There was no self-pity in her voice, no dramatic pleading, just the simple acknowledgement of approaching death, spoken with the kind of dignity that Jake had only seen in the very brave or the very royal. Apparently, she was both. "Not if I can help it," Jake replied, and began working to free her from the wreckage. It took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering and the use of a piece of debris as a lever, but finally Jake managed to lift the twisted metal enough for Layrana to pull her leg free. The limb was badly damaged, bent at an angle that made Jake's stomach turn, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she reached into what remained of her garments and pulled out a device that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a piece of abstract art. "Healing matrix," she explained, her voice growing weaker. "But it's not working." She held up the device, and Jake could see that its crystalline surface was cracked, the soft light within it flickering like a dying candle. Jake examined the device with the careful attention of someone whose life might depend on understanding alien technology. It was clearly sophisticated, far beyond anything humanity had developed, but the damage was obvious even to his untrained eye. Whatever had caused her escape pod to crash had also destroyed her only chance of survival. "There has to be another way," Jake said, more to himself than to her. "Some kind of backup system, or—" "There is," Layrana interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it requires compatible genetic material. A transfusion of living essence to neutralize the toxins in my system." She looked at him with those deep purple eyes, and Jake saw something there that chilled him to the bone. "It requires the blood of another being, someone whose life force can strengthen mine." Jake stared at her, processing the implications. "You mean my blood? But we're different species. That's impossible. It would kill you, or me, or both of us." Layrana's breathing was becoming more labored, and the pool of luminescent fluid beneath her had grown alarmingly large. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but without it, I die anyway. And you will be alone on this world, with no way to call for help. My people will come looking for me eventually. If I live, I can ensure your safety. If I die—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Jake looked around at the alien wasteland surrounding them, at his destroyed ship and his limited supplies, and realized she was right. His emergency beacon might eventually reach Earth, but it could take weeks or months for a rescue mission to find him. The Zephyrians, on the other hand, would have search parties combing this system within days. His best chance for survival lay in keeping the princess alive. But it was more than just tactical thinking that made his decision. As Jake looked down at Lyrana's face, pale and growing paler as her life ebbed away, he felt something that surprised him. Compassion. Not for an enemy or an alien, but for another thinking being who was suffering and afraid and trying to face death with dignity. In that moment, all the politics and warfare and species barriers faded away, leaving just two individuals who needed each other to survive. "All right," Jake said, pulling out his field medical kit. "Let's do this." The process was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. Using a combination of his human medical supplies and Lyrana's damaged healing matrix, they improvised a transfusion system that should have been impossible. Jake's red blood and Lyrana's crystalline life essence mixed in ways that defied every law of biology he knew. Instead of rejection or poisoning, something miraculous happened. As Jake's blood entered Lyrana's system, her crystalline veins began to pulse with a warmer light. The spreading pool of luminescent fluid slowed, then stopped entirely. Her breathing deepened and strengthened, and color returned to her translucent features. But the changes weren't limited to her. Jake felt a strange tingling sensation spreading up his arm from the transfusion point, a warmth that seemed to flow directly into his nervous system. "Something's happening," he said, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. Lyrana's eyes opened wide, and for a moment they flashed with an inner light that matched the glow beneath her skin. "I can feel you," she whispered, wonder and fear mixing in her voice. "Your thoughts, your emotions, they're inside my mind." Jake gasped as he suddenly experienced the same thing. It was like having a second voice in his head, but instead of words, it spoke in feelings and images and half-formed concepts that he somehow understood perfectly. He could sense Lyrana's relief at being alive, her gratitude toward him, and underneath it all, a deep sadness that seemed to go back years. "What's happening to us?" Jake asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "The blood bond," Lyrana replied, her voice stronger now, but filled with awe. "It's something from the old legends, stories my people told about the time before the Empire, when we lived in harmony with other species. I thought it was just mythology." Jake helped her sit up, marveling at how quickly she was recovering. The terrible wound on her leg was already beginning to heal, new crystalline tissue forming over the damaged areas. But more than that, he could feel her strength flowing into him, enhancing his own natural resilience and healing his injured arm. "So what does this mean?" Jake asked. "Are we connected now?" Lyrana nodded slowly. "For life, I believe. Your courage and adaptability flow in my veins now, just as my resilience and longevity flow in yours. We are no longer purely human or purely Zephyrian. We are something new." Before Jake could fully process this revelation, a new sound reached their ears, the distant hum of approaching engines. Both of them looked up to see a formation of sleek, blade-shaped ships descending from the amber sky. The vessels bore the same markings as Lyrana's escape pod, but something about their aggressive formation made Jake's newly enhanced senses scream a warning. "Those are not rescue ships," Lyrana said, her voice tight with fear. "Those are hunters. Someone wants me dead, and they've tracked me here." Jake felt his heart rate spike as the reality of their situation hit home. They were stranded on a hostile world, with an unknown number of enemies approaching, and their only advantage was a mystical blood bond that neither of them fully understood. It should have been hopeless. Instead, Jake found himself smiling. "Well then," he said, helping Lyrana to her feet and checking his sidearm, "I guess we'd better show them what happens when you threaten a human's friends." Through their new connection, he felt Lyrana's surprise at his confidence, followed by something that might have been the Zephyrian equivalent of a grin. Together, they moved away from the crash site toward the cover of the crystal formations, two beings from different species who had become something greater than the sum of their parts. The hunt was about to begin, but for the first time since crashing on this alien world, Jake Morrison, felt like he had a real chance of surviving. More than that, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The ultimate sacrifice. The crystal formations provided excellent cover, but Jake knew it wouldn't last long against the advanced sensors of the approaching Zephyrian ships. Through his enhanced connection with Lyrana, he could feel her knowledge of their technology flowing into his mind. Hunter-killers equipped with quantum scanners that could detect life signs through solid rock. They had maybe 10 minutes before their hiding spot became a target zone. "Why are they trying to kill you?" Jake asked as they moved deeper into the maze of crystalline structures. His enhanced reflexes, boosted by the blood bond, allowed him to navigate the treacherous terrain with surprising ease. Lyrana's mental voice carried tones of betrayal and ancient pain. "The Council of Regents. They've been manipulating my father, the Emperor, for years. I discovered their true purpose. They don't want peace with humanity. They want the war to continue because it gives them power over both our species." Jake's mind raced with the implications. "You mean this whole conflict, 5 years of fighting, millions of deaths on both sides, was orchestrated by a faction that profits from chaos?" Lyrana finished. "I found evidence, communications with something called the Void Collective. They're not Zephyrian, not human, something else entirely. Something that feeds on conflict and division." The hunter ships were closer now, their engines creating a harmonic vibration that made the crystal formations ring like massive wind chimes. Jake could see searchlights sweeping back and forth across the alien landscape, methodically eliminating potential hiding spots. But as he watched, something unexpected happened. His enhanced vision, sharpened by the blood bond, began to pick up patterns in the light that he shouldn't have been able to see. The search grid had a weakness, a blind spot where the overlapping sensor fields created a null zone. "This way," he said, guiding Lyrana toward the gap in their enemy's coverage. "I can see the pattern of their search. There's a way through." Lyrana looked at him with something approaching awe. "Your species' pattern recognition abilities are remarkable. Combined with our sensory enhancements, you're seeing things that even Zephyrian military scanners would miss." They moved like ghosts through the crystal maze, Jake's tactical instincts enhanced by Lyrana's intuitive understanding of her people's technology. Behind them, the search teams landed and began their methodical hunt, but the fugitives stayed one step ahead, using the unique advantages of their blood bond to outsmart sensors designed by the galaxy's most advanced civilization. It was during a rest in a particularly dense cluster of crystals that Lyrana revealed the full scope of what they faced. Using her damaged healing matrix as a makeshift communications device, she showed Jake recordings she had made before her escape, conversations between council members and shadowy figures whose faces seemed to bend light around them, making them impossible to identify clearly. "The Void Collective has been playing both sides for decades," Lyrana explained as they watched the recordings. "They provided the Zephyrians with the coordinates of human colonies, and they gave humanity intel about our military movements. Every time peace seemed possible, they would orchestrate another atrocity to keep the hatred alive." Jake felt a cold rage building in his chest, enhanced by the emotional resonance of the blood bond. How many people died because of their manipulation? "Millions on both sides," Lyrana replied, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. "My own brother died in a battle that the Collective arranged. They convinced the Council that humanity was planning a surprise attack on our home system. The fleet we sent to intercept them fell into an ambush that the Collective had set in motion. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture so horrifying that Jake had trouble accepting it. They're not just profiting from the war. They are feeding on it. The death, the hatred, the fear, that's what they want." Lyrana nodded, her crystalline features reflecting the soft glow of the alien stars that had begun to appear in the darkening sky. "And now that I know their secret, they'll do anything to stop me from exposing them. The council members who serve them would rather see me dead than risk losing their power." A new sound reached their ears, the distinctive whine of personal hover vehicles. The search teams had found their general area and were closing in. Jake could see the lights moving between the crystal formations, systematic and relentless. They had minutes at most before discovery. "We can't run forever," Jake said, checking his weapon. "And even if we escape this planet, where can we go? Your own people want you dead, and mine are too far away to help." Lyrana was quiet for a long moment, and through their connection, Jake could feel her wrestling with a terrible decision. "There is one place," she said finally, "the celestial throne, my father's palace on the homeworld. If I could reach him, show him the evidence." "That's suicide," Jake protested. "It's the most heavily defended location in the Zephyrian Empire. We'd never make it past the outer perimeter." "We would if we had help," Lyrana replied, and Jake felt her resolve crystallizing like her own physical form. "My father is not evil, just deceived. If he saw the truth about the Void Collective, he would act. But the only way to show him is to use the ancient bloodline connection, a mental link that only members of the royal family can access." Jake was beginning to understand her plan, and he didn't like it. "You're talking about using the blood bond to amplify your telepathic abilities, aren't you? The same bond that's keeping us both alive right now." "The blood bond was never meant to be permanent," Lyrana admitted, her mental voice growing softer. "It's a temporary joining of life forces, designed to last only until the recipient is strong enough to survive on their own. If I use it to boost my telepathic range to galactic levels, to project the truth directly into the minds of both our species, it would burn out the connection," Jake finished, "and probably kill both of us in the process." Lyrana looked at him with those deep purple eyes, and Jake saw in them the same mixture of fear and determination that he had felt during his first combat mission. "Jake Morrison of Earth, you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. You trusted me when I was your enemy, and you chose compassion over hatred. If there's anyone in this galaxy who can help me end this war, it's you." The hover vehicles were very close now, their lights casting moving shadows through the crystal formations. Jake could hear voices calling out in the musical Zephyrian language, coordinating their search pattern. They had perhaps 2 minutes before discovery, and after that, there would be no time for noble sacrifices or galaxy-saving plans. But as Jake looked at Lyrana, feeling the strength and courage flowing between them through the blood bond, he realized that this moment had been inevitable from the second he decided to help her. Everything in his life, his training, his experiences, his stubborn human refusal to accept defeat, had been preparing him for this choice. "If we're going to do this, we need to do it right," Jake said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were contemplating. "How do we get off this planet and reach your father?" Lyrana's face lit up with hope and determination. "The hunter ships have quantum communicators, devices capable of instant transmission across galactic distances. If we can capture one, then we broadcast the truth to everyone at once," Jake continued. "Not just your father, but every human and Zephyrian in the galaxy. Make it impossible for the Void Collective to hide." Through their bond, Jake felt Lyrana's surprise at his tactical thinking. "You would risk everything for peace between our species, even knowing it might cost you your life." Jake thought about his family back on Earth, his squadron mates who believed he was already dead, the millions of humans and Zephyrians who continued to die in a war built on lies. He thought about the future that might be possible if the truth came to light, a galaxy where different species worked together instead of destroying each other. "That's what humans do," he said simply. "We don't run from the impossible. We run toward it." The plan they formed in the next 90 seconds was audacious to the point of insanity. Using Jake's enhanced tactical abilities and Lyrana's knowledge of Zephyrian technology, they would ambush one of the hunter teams, capture their ship, and fly directly to the most heavily defended location in the galaxy. Once there, they would use the blood bond to amplify Lyrana's telepathic abilities to galactic range, broadcasting the truth about the Void Collective to every sentient mind within 1,000 light years. It should have been impossible. A human soldier and an alien princess, armed with nothing but a sidearm and a damaged healing matrix, attempting to infiltrate and overcome one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The odds were astronomical, the risks incalculable. Jake had never felt more confident in his life. The attack came with surgical precision. Jake's enhanced reflexes allowed him to move faster than any purely human soldier, while Lyrana's newfound adaptability let her anticipate and counter Zephyrian combat tactics. The hunter team never had a chance. Within minutes, Jake and Lyrana were aboard a sleek Zephyrian vessel, racing toward the stars and the most dangerous gamble in galactic history. As they entered hyperspace, Lyrana began the process of preparing for the telepathic broadcast. Jake could feel her drawing on the power of their blood bond, channeling not just her own life force, but his as well. The sensation was indescribable, like having his soul stretched across the universe, touching the minds of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. "I can see them," Lyrana whispered, her voice filled with wonder and terror. "Humans and Zephyrians, all of them carrying the pain of this war. All of them longing for something better." Jake felt his own strength flowing into her, his human determination and stubborn refusal to surrender mixing with her royal dignity and telepathic power. Together, they reached out across the galaxy, preparing to share the truth that would either save both their species or destroy them in the attempt. The celestial throne appeared before them, a massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single crystal the size of a small moon. Defense platforms bristled with weapons capable of vaporizing entire fleets, and patrol ships moved in patterns that spoke of centuries of military tradition. It was beautiful and terrible, and absolutely impregnable. "Last chance to change your mind," Jake said as they approached the outer perimeter. Lyrana's mental voice carried absolute certainty. "I am Lyrana of the Crystalline Throne, and you are Jake Morrison of Earth. We are something new under the stars, and we're going to show the galaxy what cooperation can accomplish." The defense platforms opened fire, filling space with energy beams that could have melted asteroids. But Jake's enhanced reflexes and Lyrana's intuitive understanding of the palace's defenses allowed them to thread the needle, dancing between destruction with an elegance that neither species could have achieved alone. They crashed into the throne room itself, their stolen ship carving through crystal walls and ceremonial pillars before coming to rest at the foot of the Emperor's seat. As guards surrounded them and weapons were raised, Lyrana stood up, her form glowing with the power of the blood bond, and began to speak. But she didn't speak with words. Instead, she projected images directly into the minds of everyone present. The recordings of the Council's treachery, the evidence of the Void Collective's manipulation, the truth about 5 years of orchestrated warfare. Jake felt his own memories being drawn into the broadcast, his experiences as a human soldier fighting an enemy he now knew had been innocent of the crimes attributed to them. The projection expanded beyond the throne room, beyond the palace, beyond the planet itself. Every human and Zephyrian in the galaxy suddenly had access to the same truth, the same horrifying revelation about the forces that had been manipulating them. Jake felt his life force burning away like fuel in a rocket engine, powering a telepathic broadcast that spanned light years. Through the connection, he felt Lyrana's strength failing as well. The blood bond that had saved both their lives was consuming itself, transforming their joined life force into pure communication. They were dying, but their deaths would mean the end of the lies that had killed millions. In the throne room, the Emperor of the Zephyrians looked at his daughter with eyes that held both terror and profound love. "Lyrana," he whispered, "what have they done to us? What have I done?" "You were deceived, Father," she replied, her voice growing weaker as the broadcast continued. "We all were. But now everyone knows the truth." Jake felt the last of his strength flowing away, but instead of fear, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Through the fading blood bond, he could sense the reactions across the galaxy. Human and Zephyrian forces stopping in mid-battle, commanders on both sides realizing they had been fighting the wrong enemy, ordinary people of both species reaching out to each other with hands that had been taught to hold weapons. Did we do it? He asked, his voice barely audible. Lyrana smiled, her crystalline features beautiful even as they began to dim. Look. Jake turned his failing vision toward the great windows of the throne room and saw something that made his heart soar even as it prepared to stop beating. Human and Zephyrian ships were arriving together, their crews working side by side to hunt down the real enemy, the Void Collective agents who had been hiding among both civilizations, feeding on hatred and death. We did it, Jake whispered. We actually did it. The blood bond finally burned itself out, and Jake Morrison collapsed beside Princess Lyrana at the foot of the crystalline throne. But they had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had revealed the truth, ended a war, and shown the galaxy that cooperation between different species wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. When the human rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found Jake in the Palace Medical Facility, barely alive but stable. The Zephyrian healing technology, enhanced by residual traces of the blood bond, had kept him breathing long enough for help to arrive. Lyrana was beside him, her own recovery progressing slowly but surely. The war is over, the human admiral told him. Both species are working together now, hunting down Void Collective cells throughout the galaxy. Your sacrifice, both of your sacrifices, saved millions of lives.
Jake looked over at Lyrana, who was just beginning to stir. Their blood bond was gone, but the connection between them remained, not telepathic anymore, but something deeper. A shared understanding of what it meant to choose hope over hatred, cooperation over conflict. It wasn't a sacrifice, Jake said softly. It was an investment. An investment in the future. The future that followed was everything they had hoped for and more. Humans and Zephyrians worked together to rebuild the worlds damaged by war, to hunt down the remaining Void Collective agents, and to create a new kind of civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. Jake and Lyrana became symbols of that cooperation, living proof that different species could not only coexist but make each other stronger. Years later, when historians tried to understand how two individuals had managed to end a galactic war, they always came back to the same conclusion. It wasn't superior technology or military strategy that had saved the day. It was something uniquely human, the stubborn refusal to accept that some problems were unsolvable, combined with the willingness to sacrifice everything for the chance to make things better. They thought Earth was just another backwater world, populated by primitive creatures who didn't understand the complexities of galactic politics. They were wrong. When the stars finally noticed humanity, they discovered a species that didn't just survive, they made everything around them stronger. And when a human warrior gave his blood to save a dying alien princess, he proved that the greatest weapon in the galaxy wasn't technology or telepathy. It was compassion. And in the end, that made all the difference.